Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 33 of Rise Up the Podcast, the best podcast in the world of lacrosse. It is a special episode. I'm here with TorchPro member, our producer, Danny Healey. Greg Beast, Gorenlian, he's out grinding with our boy Deemer Class at First Class, that awesome event we talked about a few episodes back. And Scotty, he may join later, but he's been grinding 42 Performance LLC goalie lessons. So I'm here with my boy, your boy, our boy, Danny Healey. How you doing, Dan?
I am fantastic. Let's get it. I'm happy to be back. I know I had to fill in for you an episode. I almost took your job, but the fans wanted you back, so you're in your rightful spot. But happy to fill in for the boys while they're grinding. Lax is life for Greg and Scotty, so they gotta go get that money.
Lax is life for all of us. What are you talking about? But no, I listened to that episode that you filled in for me. You did a great job. I was actually listening to it on a beach in Portugal, having a great time. And you did a great job, and I'm glad to, chop it up with you here.
I appreciate that, man. I mean, I'm a former, as I said in the last episode, I played lacrosse in college at Colgate. I'm a lax guy. I'm just not on the lax rat tier yet, like you guys. Like that's a different level, but I can still chop it up. I can still talk PLL. I know the ins and outs. I know the players. I know the game well, and I'm ready to rock.
We're getting you there, though. You're not lax rat yet, but we're getting you there. Like Heel said, he played at Colgate. That's actually how, for the listeners, I was introduced to Heels. We grew up in a similar area, both from Massachusetts. He went to Govs. I went to Belmont Hill. We crossed paths, but my best friend in high school, Joe Delaney, played lacrosse at Colgate. I spent some time up at Colgate for Laxmas. That's always a good time. And met Heels through that. And this is history. And now we're here recording podcasts to Rise Up.
Now we're here. I think we lost one of your buddies that trip at Laxmas. I don't know if you woke up in the right spot.
That was Squest. I actually wasn't there that weekend. That was a fall weekend. But okay. I know what you're talking about. I remember, yeah. I think Max Gustafson, our boy who played at Brown, and Colin Orr, who played at Colgate with Heels and Joe Delaney, they were on the search for our boy AJ Vasquez. But he turned up. He's okay. He's living his life now, so everything's okay.
Colgate gets after it on and off the field. But no, you said it. You're getting me to the lax rat status because I listened to the Rise Up podcast. Like you said, it's the number one lacrosse podcast in the world. And it's really getting me into that lax rat mode. So thank you for that. But yeah, man, let's dive into the PLL weekend. So it was week 2, right?
Week 2. And week 2, we talked about it last week. Teams are still feeling themselves out. I brought up a point with Greg last week about how we went from watching college lacrosse Memorial Day weekend to week 1 of PLL, and it's a different brand of lacrosse. Not that it's better or worse, it's just different. These teams are, week 1, week 2, they're feeling themselves out, and it's definitely new. You only have about a week of training camp to feel each other out, get used to each other, get chemistry. And we talk about all the time these players coming off of NLL. We saw this week a lot of Chaos players back. We know that they're very heavily Canadian influenced, and they have a lot of box players. They had a lot of players that were on the Bandits that made it to the championship and won the NLL championship. So we definitely saw a new Chaos team this week, and we definitely saw chemistry blooming this week.
Yeah, I think why don't we I was going to save the Chaos game for the fourth and final game because it's the fourth and final game of the weekend. But why don't we start there? Because I know our guy, Josh Byrne, he actually had the OT winner in that game for the Chaos to win 14-13 over the Cannons. And if I'm not mistaken, he was the guy, he was on the Bandits who said that won the NLL championship, right?
Exactly. Yes, he was.
Yeah, so I mean, what a stud coming back, scoring the OT winner. Chaos, 14, Cannons, 13. Byrne went 3-1 that game, but yeah, what did you think of that game?
So there's a couple things. We talked about, the Chaos lost week 1 in overtime to the Water Dogs, and it was a very low-scoring game. This week, more of the norm, 14-13, and like you said, Josh Byrne, overtime winner. A couple things stick out to me. Blaze being Blaze, we've had him on the pod. Great episode. If you haven't listened to that, tune in. Go find it in our Rolodex. He's a character. Saved at 56%, 14 saves. That's probably a bad day for him. I talked about last week in terms of the Cannons. I would like to see the Cannons try out Kirst in the cage. They still went with Gittleman. He saved it at 40%. That's, under 50%, not going to do it for you. We've talked about it last year, we talked about it this year. Cannons are rebuilding. We had Hartzell on. He talked about how this new team was. We talked about last week how Kavanaugh in his interview said, they're all trying to prove something. And it's just like, I feel like I'm a broken record saying that the Cannons are just right there. They are still just right there. They lost this game in overtime to, a team that was in the championship last year. But it's a loss, right? So it's tough to take positives out of this if you're the Cannons. Holman was 3-1. Greg last week talked about them trying FOP at the faceoff X. They went with Kelly. He did a good job. He was 15-25. The Cannons have the pieces, but they're just like so close. They can't. I don't want to say they can't figure it out. I think they will, but I just saw on the waiver wire, our boy Dan Arestia tweeted out they picked up Cade Van Raphorst off the waivers. The Atlas dropped him. It's a big pickup for the Cannons. I think that will help them out down at the defensive end. So I think for the Cannons, they're trending upwards with that pickup. I'm interested to see them this week in Columbus. But, for the Chaos, winning this early is big for them, right? Usually we see their NLL guys come in, takes them some time, right? The Chaos playbook is they lose a bunch of games. Then all of a sudden they turn it on late, they make the playoffs, and then they make a run. So it's an interesting game, interesting result, but it was a great game to watch for sure.
Yeah, and one last comment too. I'll just go back to Josh Byrne because I feel like Josh Byrne is the best athlete in the PLL. Like I was watching that goal. I don't know what I think he got inside on someone and he finished. Like he is the best athlete in the PLL. I think hands down.
I don't want to say he's underrated because he is so fucking good, but he almost doesn't get as much respect as he deserves, right? Like this guy dominates in both leagues. And we talked about this when we had him on. Like he's a star in both leagues. And his presence was felt early and often throughout the whole game, and he buries the OT winner. Yeah, like you said, he got inside, gave him a little rocker, his defenseman fell, and he just, stuck one. And he got within 5-5, and was the goal he couldn't. Gittleman couldn't do anything on that.
No. Last thing on this game, gotta shout out my boy Brian Minikis, who Colgate alum. He talked to Gino, so shout out to Minnow.
Speaking of him, I saw a stat from our boy Joe Keegan that week 1 he had the most touches. They're tracking touches now in the PLL, and he had the most touches of the ball of anyone else in the league. So it shows how much the Chaos value him. That basically the offense is running through him. That he's touching the ball the most. So it's pretty cool.
He was a freshman when I was a senior at Colgate, and kid was a stud. He touched the ball. Same thing. He was a rookie, and he was the guy leading our offense at X. Like, he's a speed dodger. He can make people miss, and he's a stud. So he'll do well in the PLL. One last thing there. I saw some funny clip with him week 1. So week 1 PLL was in Albany in their football stadium. And in the PLL, the end line's 5 yards shorter. And so it's right on the goal line of the end line at the Albany Stadium. And he steps on the end line because a week before he was playing with Georgetown at Albany in the NCAA tournament, and you can go back there. So he was just working the ball around at X. He steps on the back end line.
He pulled what's it called? What's that quarterback's name?
Dan Orlovsky.
Yeah, he pulled an Orlovsky.
Yeah, he pulled an Orlovsky. I actually think the PLL tweeted at Orlovsky, so it was pretty funny to see.
And he's a lax guy. Orlovsky, he's a lacrosse guy.
He loves lax. Yeah, he does. So let's jump over to another one-goal game. We had 3 of them this weekend, which is wild. And it's
same as last weekend.
3 last weekend too?
Yep, 3 last weekend too.
It's also wild because every spread in the PLL is a goal and a half, 1.5. So, it's tough. It's tough to pick them out there.
Greg talks about it all the time. He takes the money lines because
smart.
all these games are, so close. But what game are you going to throw at me?
Atlas 12, Whip Snakes 11. The Whip Snakes are 0-2. Chris Gray had the game winner with 18 seconds to go in the fourth quarter. Jeff Teat went 3-2. This was the game on ABC this weekend, their premiere game, and it was a great game.
Okay, you brought up Chris Gray's winner. Great take, great goal. I don't know if you saw the clip on that. It was the biggest moving pick I have ever seen. As someone, for me, I don't know if the listeners know, but when I was in college, my job was off ball. I set a shit ton of picks. And I got called for my fair share of moving picks. So I know when a pick is moving and when a pick is a good pick. And you can get away with some, but this pick that was set for Chris Gray to get free for this goal was the biggest moving pick I've ever seen. If you pull up the clip, I forget who the player was. It might have been Costabile. I'm not positive. He runs into Chris Gray's defenseman and then allows Chris Gray to get topside, and he sticks an awesome shot coming up the hash. Great goal, great take, great shot. But, I mean, it needs to be called.
Is there going to be review, like video review in the PLL? Is that a thing? Because I know in the NCAA, obviously, there's Creasegate.
So there is video review and challenges in the PLL in terms of, crease goals. I don't know. I feel like if it could have been reviewed, it would have been reviewed. That's how blatant it was. It was insane. Yeah. But, I mean, I don't want to get stuck on that too much. It was a good game. I was pretty harsh on the Atlas last week. I wasn't impressed with them week 1. Week 2, beating the Whipsnakes, huge. Whipsnakes have Zed back. They still beat them. They held Zed to shooting for, I think, 2 for 10. That's a bad day for Zed, and it's unlike Zed. And they did it. The Atlas defense did a great job on him. Concannon and Cage did his job, but also Burnlore for the Whipsnakes. He saved it at 60%. He did a great job. It was a great back and forth game. Whipsnakes at 0-2. It's definitely not where they're used to be. Right. I would say in the short lifespan of the PLL, the Whipsnakes, this is a good analogy for me and you because, we're from Massachusetts. The Whipsnakes are basically the Patriots. They just win. They find ways to win. And, they haven't won the championship, last year or the year before, but, they're basically the dynasty of the PLL. And starting 0-2, I think I saw some tweets. Our boy Shane, who's done a great job with the Twitter recently.
Shout out Shane.
He's been great.
Also follow us on Twitter, Rise Up Pod on Twitter.
Absolutely. Follow us on Twitter for sure. We are blasting out some takes. We're trying to engage with our fans. If you tweet back at us and have a good take, we'll definitely shout you out on the pod. But so I think Shane tweeted, is it cause for concern for the Whipsnakes being 0-2? And it was a resounding no, absolutely not. The Whipsnakes.
If I'm a betting man, I'm hammering the Whipsnakes future to win the PLL.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
That's free money.
I was also pretty hard last week on Romar Dennis. I think he last week we shouted out that he shot 0 for 8. This week, he potted a 2-pointer. That's his game. If he can get a 2-pointer for the Atlas, he's doing his job. So I didn't think he took less shots. I think he was 1 for 5 and with a 2-bomb, and I think he also had a helper. So, Romar being more efficient is what's going to make the Atlas, turn. That's good for them.
Greg would be fucking pissed at us if he was on here and we talked about this game and we didn't shout out Baptiste at the X. I mean, he had a great game at the X.
Yeah, shout him out for sure.
Yeah, so what, he was like 15 for 23, so like Trevor Baptiste is doing Trevor Baptiste things.
I was going to say, I almost didn't shout him out because Trevor going 65% or whatever that is, that's par, right?
Is
for
it?
Him.
Is it?
I mean, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I guess.
That's like...
I guess the rookie, too, Petey LaSala.
Totally. But yes, we should shout it out because 65% is what's going to make teams win games. I mean, Petey LaSala went 9 for 23, 39%. Yeah. Yes, Trevor went against a rookie, whatever. Petey did great week 1. But I guess, it flew over my head for a second because that's just what we expect out of Trevor. He's the best face-off player in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
And
so,
in terms of the Atlas, that's what's going to make them turn, right? Trevor winning faceoffs, Concannon making saves. I know I love that Greg and Scotty aren't on here right now because they love talking about how important faceoff and goalie positioning are, but it's true, right?
They love it.
They love it, but it's true. If you can win faceoffs and you can make saves, there's a really good fucking chance you're going to win the game.
Absolutely.
I also would love to shout out Brennan Curry for the Atlas. He potted a hat trick. He's a second-year player out of Syracuse, and I think he was like a little bit under the radar in terms of PLL status. He had a great career at Syracuse, and he's just doing his thing, earning himself a spot in the roster week in, week out. He had a goal last week. He had 3 goals this week. I mean, that's awesome. He was second in the team in scoring after Jeff Teat, who, like similar to Trevor, we're gonna glance over Jeff Teat going 3-2 because we just always assume he's gonna go 3-2. But
Right.
no, shout out to Brendan Curry for doing his thing, potting a few goals. Congrats to him. That's awesome.
If you want to see a funny clip involving Brendan Curry, look up, you know how college lacrosse does those pump up videos? Like every year, it's like 2020 college lacrosse pump up video. So that year, 2020, I graduated 2019. In the first minute, you'll see Brendan Curry just crossing up a short stick D mid from Colgate. It's me. Just like absolutely crosses me
I mean,
up.
how fast is he? He's so
Oh
fast.
my god! It was the fourth quarter. Hey, and we also won that fucking game in the dome, and so let's fucking go. But yeah, it's pretty funny. So I need to work that in a little bit. But yeah, man, Whip Snakes down 0-2 start the season. But like you said, I expect them to bounce back.
100%.
Cool. Well, let's jump over to another 1-goal game and a 2-0 team, the Redwoods. They won 10-9 over the Water Dogs, last year's reigning champs. Ryder Garnsey, our guy Ryder Garnsey, is off to a hot start. He leads the PLL in goals with 8, 2 more than the next player. But yeah, the Redwoods are 2-0, and they look pretty damn good.
I was gonna say, is Ryder a dark horse for PLL MVP this year?
I mean, yeah. Well, right now he'd be up there. He said on the podcast his goal is to make All-Star Weekend, and it's looking pretty good right now.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't want to say it's a rise up bump, but he's out of the gates running. We talked about last week. He made a joke, luck of the Irish. He's on the coaching staff for Notre Dame. They won the national championship, and now he's out of the gates firing. Rob Pennell, I talked about last week how he's done such a great job getting other people involved in the offense. He was 3-1 this week, so people probably weren't sliding to him as much. He said, "Okay, I'll call my own number. I'm going to go 3-1." We talked
Is
about
Rob Pennell still elite? Like, is he still elite? Because I know he's old.
absolutely. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Just
He
as an
is
average fan, I don't know.
Rob Pennell is. If you went into a lab and made probably the most prototypical best ex-attackman you could make, it's Rob Pennell. Then you have guys like Sowers, Ament, who are not far off and they're younger in their career, but at this point, for Rob Pennell doing what he's doing this far along in his career, he's still producing at an insane rate, and he's controlling this Redwoods offense. And like you said, they're 2-0. He's doing his job.
Good for Rob Pennell then. I didn't know. TD Ireland. I mean, he's still one of the best face-off guys in the league.
Listen, there's a reason that the 2 face-off guys for Team USA is TD and Trevor.
Right.
Trevor is the best face-off guy in the world, and TD Ireland is the second best face-off guy in the world. Granted, Nardella tore his ACL. He's out right now. He's rehabbing. I know he's getting right. But in terms of who's playing right now, yeah, it's the number 2 is TD. And he chipped in a goal this week for them as well. We saw a ton of distribution. I know 10-9, in my opinion, is still low scoring. I don't know what the total was for this game, but it had to be under. We talked about this is the second week in a row the Water Dogs haven't put up double-digit goals, coming off a championship. Yes, they won week 1, but, now 10-9 week 2. I don't know what's going on with their offense in terms of, they have Sowers. They have McCardle. McCardle had a career year last year. They have Connor Kelly, who, member of Team USA, who scored the OT winner last week. They're figuring things out. I wouldn't push the panic button yet if I'm a Water Dogs fan, but it's definitely cause for concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you hear all the time, right? The Super Bowl hangover is like one of the more cliche things in sports. I think that's a real phenomenon across all sports. Like You win a championship, you're coming into the next season, and you have a little bit of like a relaxed mindset. Like you're not like, oh, I need to go prove myself and win a championship. Like they can come into the season like a little bit more relaxed. I think that's what's happening. It'll kick them in the ass, and they'll get it going later in the season. But like the Super Bowl hangover is happening to the Water Dogs right now.
That's an interesting point. The Water Dogs, they started DeLuca again this week. He did a great job. He saved it at 58%. But they have Dylan Ward. He came off his NLL season, probably resting him up. He is definitely a linchpin for the Water Dogs team. It starts from the ground up. It starts from the goalie position. He definitely, he makes a big save. I remember being at the PLL championship last year, and the Chaos, would go on runs. And all of a sudden, he makes a big save. It's up and out the other way. He has a fantastic break where, his middies, short stick D middies, LSMs, no, if he's making a save, you better break. He just lobs it out, sends them on their way, and it turns into offense for the Water Dogs. So he's definitely an important part. It's interesting that Ward was available this week for the Water Dogs, and they still went with DeLuca. And not that DeLuca did a bad job. He saved it at 58%. So DeLuca's doing his job, but I still think that the Water Dogs will transition Ward back into the mix. So it'll be interesting to see next week in Columbus. I don't know. I'm not worried if I'm a Water Dogs fan. I think they're going to figure it out. They have, unbelievable players on offense. I think we talked about Ryder Garnsey being a dark horse for MVP. I still think, the most versatile, also probably most valuable player in the league is Zach Currier. He does it all. He is a weapon on offense. He takes faceoffs. He can play defense. He has that Canadian tenacity in him, and he doesn't take bullshit. He's always in the top of the league in ground balls. And, it's a cliche saying that, probably middle school lacrosse coaches say, but ground balls win games.
They do. One last point on the Redwoods. I want to see my boy Miles Jones get going. He's one of my good guys. He is my first recurring guest on my podcast, Pass the Torch, so I'm always a big Miles Jones fan. But he didn't do much in this game, and I want to see him get the ball. I want to see him get downhill and get that fucking rocket of a shot off. So I want to see Miles Jones get going this season.
I think you bring up a good point. It's him and Sergio Perkovic are more or less a two-headed monster. They're probably the two most athletic guys in the PLL.
Yeah.
Both of them haven't gotten going necessarily yet, but when they do, the Redwoods midfield turns into just a different animal. When you have Perkovic, Jones, Nakai Montgomery, Jules, those guys just, drawing slides, being threats, two-bomb threats.
Yeah.
Once that gets going, once that gets clicking, that will be a dangerous Redwoods offense. And also, I want to shout out my boy Kirst. Cole Kirst. My boy Connor Kirst's younger brother made his PLL debut for the Redwoods. Potted 2 goals, had 1 helper. Awesome showing from him. So congrats to the Kirst family. They're the best. And keep killing it, Cole.
Yeah, we had a Curse brother on the show, so shout out the Curse family. All right, let's move into the final game of the weekend. This was actually the first game of the weekend, but it was the only game that wasn't a 1-goal game. So Archers 12, Chrome 7. The Archers now are 2-0 and led by Tommy Schreiber, the best player in the world. I think we talked about who's our MVP favorite right now. It's probably Tommy Schreiber. I think he leads the league in points with 10. He had 6 on last week in week 2. So, yep, Archers 12, Chrome 7. You're Chrome, but what do you got here?
Okay, so before we get into this breakdown, I'm going to air out a personal grievance a little bit.
Let's hear it.
Tom Schreiber had a play, and I think it got on SportsCenter Top 10, where he...
Oh, you sent this in our chat.
Well, no. So, no, Tom's was a good play. He comes down the alley, bounces out, in stride, throws a behind-the-back pass to the crease to Connor Fields, who buries it. Unbelievable play. Awesome play. But I think that was like the 8th play on the top 10 plays. And like number 3 was this play from Xander Dixon where there was a loose ball and he whacks at the loose ball and it goes to what the hell is the guy's name who played at Denver, who's the attackman for the Atlas? I'm blanking right now.
Couldn't tell you, but keep telling your story and I'll let you know.
Whatever. So Xander Dixon whacks at the ground ball. It bounces to his teammate who buries it in backdoor. And PLL Instagram, PLL Twitter, SportsCenter Twitter, ESPN Twitter, whatever, all of the social media. What a bounce pass from Xander Dixon. What skill, blah, blah, blah.
Eric Law.
Eric Law, thank you. He buried it. And it was a good play. It was a scrappy play where I think Chris Gray was dodging. Defenseman made a good play. The ball bounces on the ground to Xander Dixon, who takes a whack at it, who was clearly trying to put the ball in the net. The ball bounces to Eric Law, who buries it on the backside. Was it a cool play? Yes, absolutely cool play. Unbelievable circumstance, hand-eye coordination from Xander Dixon, hand-eye coordination from Eric Law, who was able to finish it. Was that play better than Tom Schreiber going down the alley in traffic, bouncing it out in stride, throwing a behind-the-back pass in the crease through traffic to Connor Fields? Absolutely not. And that's my beef with the Twitter and gassing up. Real lacrosse fans and people who are viewing realize what's intentional and what's not. And even my dad texted me this week. It was like, oh, LOL at your tweet about that, in quotations, bounce pass. He's 60 years old. He knew that wasn't a bounce pass. So whatever. That's my little shtick there.
Well, hey, wait. I appreciate your gripe on this, right? Like, as a Lax fan and as a Lax rat, like anyone listening to this podcast right now, 25 minutes into the show, they're Lax fans. But I will say, yes, the Tommy Schreiber play was better than the Xander Dixon bounce pass, in quotations. But I am pumped to see lacrosse in SportsCenter top 10. We want to grow the game, right? We want to get this in front of more fans, more eyeballs. Like, put more lacrosse in the ESPN top 10, and I'll be happy. So I appreciate your gripe as a Lax rap, but I'm happy to see it in the SportsCenter top 10.
And you're 100% correct. That was the biggest reply back that I got, was that it's good to see lacrosse in SportsCenter top 10, and that's absolutely correct. I just want them to get it right. There's enough top 10 plays to go around.
Put Xander Dixon at 10 and Schreiber in the top 2.
Exactly. So it's nitpicking, but you're exactly right in the greater good of all things lacrosse. Lacrosse being on the top 10 plays for the PLL, for lacrosse in general, is what is important.
All right, so what do you got? Any takes on this game from your Chrome that lost?
Yeah, so I am on record a Chrome fan. I love, how much fun they have, and I think that they are, I call them the island of misfit toys, where, they were bottom of the league for a couple of years, and now they seem to figure things out. But
I thought of another thing before you dive into kind of your breakdown here. So you're talking about being a Chrome fan, right? So when the PLL goes to this city-based format next year, and say the Chrome are some random city out west, right? Are you still going to be a Chrome fan? Or when the Cannons come back to Boston, are you going to be a Boston Cannons guy? Because obviously I'm a Boston guy, big Bostonian sports fan. As soon as Boston gets named a team, I'm gonna be the biggest Boston PLL fan there is.
That's a good point.
I'm just curious from your take, are you still going to be attached to the Chrome, or are you going to be I'm a Boston guy?
No, that's a good point. To be completely honest, yes, I root for the Chrome, but I am a fan of the whole league in general, and I definitely gravitate towards teams of players who are on the teams that I know or who have played with, and I root for them for sure. Definitely where I'm from takes into account, and playing for the Cannons in my past life in the MLL
True.
definitely takes into account. But I don't know. I'm definitely not tied to anything. Even if the Cannons go to Boston, I think my allegiance towards players that I've played with or players that I'm a fan of would take precedence, and I'd root for their success over a hometown allegiance.
That's fair. I feel that's common too among former athletes too. Like working with NHL guys at TorchPro, right? I know a bunch of people, and now I gravitate. The Florida Panthers, they're losing in Game 5 right now to Vegas. They're going to lose the cup. But I know Brandon Montour well, so I've been rooting for the Panthers. So, like, I know how that works. Where the guys that gravitate toward there. So, continue, though. Give me your breakdown on this.
So, first and foremost, I think Brett Dobson, he had 18 saves, saved it at 72%. That is insane. Saving at 72% is ridiculous. For the Atlas, the goalie for the Atlas, Dobson, he stood on his head. And we talked about how dominant Sisselberger was week 1. He didn't have his best week 2. That didn't
49%.
matter. What'd you say?
49% at the X week 2.
Exactly. I see it at 47.
All right, I'm not a math guy. I see him under 50.
Exactly. So he didn't have his best week, and the Atlas still found a way to win. That's a sign of a good team. Granted, your goalie's saving it at that rate. It's going to be hard to lose. But you mentioned, you mentioned Schreiber. He went off. He was 1-5. I don't know if anyone in the lacrosse world, in the pro lacrosse leagues, NLL and PLL, sees the field better than him. I think when I watch him play, I feel like things move in slow motion for him. He's
just the undisputed best lacrosse player in the world. I think that's just a fact.
Correct. And things just move in slow motion for him. He sees not only where the slides are coming from, he knows where the second slides are going. He finds those skip lanes. Ament was out for the Atlas this week. And, they still rolled. I don't want to say rolled.
For the Archers, you mean?
Archers, excuse me. I keep saying Atlas. Archers, my bad. For the Archers, they still rolled. Mac O'Keefe, 2 goals, 2 1-point goals, 1 2-point goal. I mean, he's finding his home with the Archers. Connor Fields, I think when he was with the Chaos, he had a role. He was an awesome player, and then they kind of rebranded to this Canadian, pairs offense team, and he was a little bit left out. And now that he's with the Archers, he is right back at home. He has freedom to do his thing. You saw week 1 how creative his goal was, through the legs, on the run, underhand, and he's producing at he had 2 goals this week. He's a huge asset for them. I think he's listed as a midi, but I think he's getting some good attack runs, especially with Ament out, who's their quarterback. They're still able to get production. Obviously, they have Tom Schreiber initiating from the midfield, but great game, great win. If you're an Archers fan, they show that they can win in different ways this week, and that's what I think makes them so dangerous. And I think they're my favorite. I don't know what the odds are right now, but they're my favorite for a PLL championship right now for sure. I know it's week 2; it's probably too early to say so, but they're looking sharp.
My next question is going to be, who's your overreaction after 2 weeks? Who's your favorite to win it all? But you're going Archers.
Archers, 100% Archers. Their offense is clicking right now for week 2 more so than anyone else. I think the Whips will get there once they get Brad Smith back. They had Zed back in the lineup this week. He's working his way back in. But right now, the way the Archers are clicking, once they get Ament back, they're so dangerous. And then, not to mention, on the defensive end, they have, Latrell Harris, who's probably we talk about, I was mentioning underrated players. He's very underrated. Our boy Dan Arestia, he's huge on this guy. I think he won Defensive Player of the Year in the NLL this year for his team. So that shows how well decorated he is in the NLL, and I think field lacrosse fans are seeing how good of a player he is. This is his either second or third year in the PLL, but really getting a chance to shine. Graham Hosak's on defense for the Archers, who is an absolute beast. And he had 7 ground balls this week. He's an absolute vacuum. They have Jared Connors, who played at UVA, who is a beast as an LSM. He's filling in seamlessly for their departure of it's on the tip of my tongue. Number 2 played at Loyola. I can't think of it right now. But he left, and Jared Connors is filling in seamlessly. And the defense, the goaltending, we talked about Dobson. Dobson up to the defense, up to the defensive middies, up to the midfield, up to the attack. This is a well-oiled machine if you are an Archers fan. So I think they're definitely my front runner right now.
Book them. Book them. On
Book
the
'em.
flip side, I'm looking at the Chrome roster. Honestly, like, who's their guy? Like, I could look at any other roster in the PLL and I could be like, oh yeah, he's their guy. Like, I see Logan Wisnauskas. Yeah, sure. Is it Ferrara? Is it Morrow? Like, who's their guy?
So that's a good point. And last year, their guy was Nick Turn, Brendan Nick Turn, who played at
Army.
Army. And right now, he's unavailable to play. You know, he's doing his duties for the U.S. Army. He's serving our country. So credit to him, first off. But
Shout out him.
100%. And last year, he was their quarterback down at attack. This year, Jackson Morrill's filling in, and he's doing a great job. I wouldn't be concerned as a Chrome fan in that aspect. I think Wisnauskas needs to get going a little bit more than he is. I think last year he came from college season into PLL season, and we talked about this last week with Greg, how much of an advantage these college guys do have. Coming right in, playing, how sharp they are. I think he's shaking off some rust a little bit. He is definitely one of their guys, Wisnauskas. He's probably, 2, maybe 1.
Yeah.
And so he needs to get going a little bit more. In terms of the midfield, we talked about Sam Hanley, how perfect he was last week. I talked about last week how perfect of a draft pick he was for the Chrome, taking pressure off the other midfielders. He didn't have his best game. And, we're going to have him on next week, a little preview for the next week's
Big
guest.
interview. Pumped to have Sam on.
Big interview with Sam next week, one of the premier PLL rookies. And I'm sure he'll even come on and say he didn't have his best game this week. I think he is a big part of if this team is going to spin, especially on offense. He is probably going to get the pole. And if he does his job, he doesn't need to dice up the pole and get to the cage and bury a goal. He just needs to draw a slide, get the ball moving. The Chrome have Colin Heacock. I think once he gets going a little bit more,
Right.
then that offense will get spinning. They have the pieces, and I'm still a big Chrome buyer. I'm not going to overreact to them losing by the biggest margin in week 2. Like we said, it's week 2. These guys are still figuring out. A lot of guys are shaking rust off. A lot of guys are coming in from an NLL season. So it's a feeling out process. And the way the PLL works, right? We saw it last year with the Chaos sneaking into the playoffs. I think all the teams but 2, I think 6 out of 8 make the playoffs. So it's almost, the regular season means a lot, but it's almost just like get into the playoffs and let's see what happens.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a wrap on week 2. And Sibes, I am very much impressed by your knowledge and into these games. And so well done without your co-hosts there, Greg and Scotty. But yeah, that's a wrap on week 2. And we have his overreaction. Archers are winning the championship. The Cannons are screwed. Whip Snakes, they're not done yet. Atlas look good. Redwoods look good. Dogs, and they're on that Super Bowl hangover. But that's a wrap on week 2. Well done.
There it is.
All right. Well, you mentioned it. Sam Hanley, he's coming on the show next week. We're pumped to do that. I think he wins Rookie of the Year. Hope he does. But I want to dive into some week 3 mortal locks. So we're going to pick all 4 games. You're going to pick them because you're the expert here. No one should listen to my picks.
Experting quotations.
Yeah, exactly. Columbus, Ohio. PLL is heading up to Ohio. Should be a good venue for it. But Friday night, we got Water Dogs versus the Atlas. Should be a good matchup. Atlas are the favorites here. Every spread's a goal and a half. But who you got? Atlas, Water Dogs.
So I'm not surprised that the Atlas are the favorites. Judging from the Water Dogs' first couple of weeks, I talked about how their low production on offense might be a little bit of a cause for concern. I am going to go with the underdogs, Water Dogs here. I mentioned week one, I wasn't impressed with the Atlas. I do think the Atlas have the pieces to the puzzle, but I think Dylan Ward is going to start in cage this week for the Water Dogs. I think that's going to be a big, just emotional bump for them, and I think that offensively they're gonna figure it out. And I think that it'll probably be a 1 goal game. As what it's a common thread or a common theme for what we've been seeing so far this season. But I'm going to go with the Water Dogs as the underdog.
Kind of wild how many games. It's great for the PLL. And you love seeing like the week one, the ratings. They broke the record for most viewership for an outdoor lacrosse game. Unbelievable to see. Love to see that for the league. All right, game 2, Friday night. Chrome favorites versus the Cannons.
Another interesting game. I don't want to say this is a must-win in week 3, but I think that the Cannons really need to win this game. And every year is a new year, and this is definitely a very new Cannons team. They have a new coach. They don't have Lyle anymore. They have definitely a new crop of people. But this game for the Cannons is definitely, are you real? Are you going to be a competitor? Or, are you going to be the same Cannons team as last year? And I know it's week 3.
Are they 1-1?
What'd you say?
Are they 0-2 or 1-1?
They're 0-2.
That seems like a must win.
Yeah, I think it might be. It's tough to say. Week 3, this is a must win, but just off of last year and into this year, you can't start 0-3. And I think the guys need it on the team for their morale. And it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a tight game. I'm obviously leaning to my Chrome. I think the Chrome are going to have a big bounce back game after their loss last week. I think Scanoni didn't have his best game last week. I think he's going to be back ready to go. He's going to be seeing the pill. And it's as cliched as it is, I'm going to say it again. It'll be a close game. There are no blowouts in the PLL, or they're very few and far between. These are all the best players in the world. They don't really let games get away from each other. I think it'll be back and forth. I think the Cannons are going to be ready. I think probably in the Cannons locker room, they, like we just said, are going to look at this game like a must-win. But with my allegiance to the Chrome, I'm rooting for their success. I think they're a fun group. I think they all have a good time, and they love playing with each other. So I'm leaning to my Chrome.
Moneyline Chrome, because you're not taking the spread. Saturday games. Archers are the favorites versus the Chaos. Who you got?
Yeah, this is a good game. It's going to be Chaos still, I think, feeling things out, right? We always talk about how the Chaos come in on a lull because they have all their NLL guys, but also sneaky, the Archers have Chalen Rogers activated this week. And I don't know if you know who Chalen is, but
No.
you don't?
No clue.
He's a very much so Zach Currier type of player where he's a do it all. He played at Stony Brook, scored 1 million points at Stony Brook. He plays NLL, plays PLL. He does everything, and he is definitely he's a very good cog in the system, but he also knows when to tap his own number and say, all right, I can take this matchup to the cage. I'm going to go score a goal. And that's huge for the Archers this week, especially with Grant Ament being questionable still. So I think we'll see if Grant comes back. I don't know. Dane Smith didn't play last week for the Chaos, and if he comes back, that's definitely a big plus for the Chaos and getting all of their guys. The Chaos, they start off week 1 with, for a lack of a better term, and no offense to any of those guys that are playing, but they played with a bunch of guys that are basically replacements, right? They are there to fill the spots for the NLL guys, and once the NLL guys come back, those players basically get dropped. And it's just the harsh reality of it is what it is. So the Chaos are in the process of getting their guys back. If Dane Smith plays this week, that's probably the last piece of their puzzle on offense, getting him, Byrne, Frazier, Ryan Smith, all those Canadian guys who do what they do so well together. It's a huge plus for the Chaos, but I think I mentioned it in the last week's breakdown how the Archers are my favorite for the championship. I think their offense is a well-oiled machine. I think they have so many weapons to attack you from. And like I said last week, they had, their face-off guy not have his best game, and they didn't have Grant Ament, and they still found a way to win. So I think this Archers team this year, I think their identity is going to be just finding ways to win.
Book 'em. Archers. Archers money line. All right. Get into our fourth and final game. We got a 2-0 Redwoods team versus an 0-2 Whipsnakes team. But the 0-2, the defeated team, is the favorites. So the Whipsnakes are favorited over the Redwoods, which is go ahead.
I was going to ask who the favorite was because it makes sense to me that the Whipsnakes are favorited.
Right. I mean, if you said week 3 of the PLL season, these two teams play, and the Woods are going to be the 2-0 team, and the Whipsnakes are going to be the team that hasn't won yet, it'd be like, fuck no. But that's where we're at. So I feel like I know your pick because it's a bounce back game for the Whipsnakes. Has to be.
I mean, we can go right up front with it. I am going with the Whipsnakes. The Whipsnakes are 0-2 with a goal differential of -2. They've lost two games by a goal each. I mean, this team, I'm curious to see if Brad Smith is back in the mix because he is so important for that Whipsnakes offense. But I mentioned it earlier. The Whipsnakes are, in my mind, still the New England Patriots of the PLL. They're not going to lose 3 in a row. This is definitely a bounce-back game for them. Yes, the Redwoods are 2-0. Are they playing their best lacrosse? Probably not. The Redwoods are 2-0 with a goal differential of +2, right? They've won 2 games by a goal. And
that's crazy.
You look back on the season sometimes, and you go, could we have won that game? Could we have lost that game? Those are probably both games they could have lost. Good teams find a way to win. I think these are both good teams. I think the Whipsnakes are going to have a get-right game. I think it's just too much with Bernlor in the cage, Zed back at attack, Rambo at attack. We'll see if Brad Smith is in the mix. But I think that the Whipsnakes will not go 0-3. I just don't see a world in that happening.
No, I'm logging into my DraftKings account right now. And if you don't have DraftKings, use promo code MorningBlitz, bet $5, you get a $200 free bet. Had to work that in.
Hey, yo.
I'm logging into my DraftKings account. I'm locking in a Whipsnakes. I'm taking the spread on this one. I think they come out and they win by a few goals. All right, your board this week. If for you betting people out there, Danny Seibel, the expert in lacrosse, PLL. Yeah, the PLL expert. He's got Whipsnakes. He's got Archers. He's got Chrome. Do you say Water Dogs or Atlas?
Water Dog. I forget, but
you said Water Dogs.
I think
you
Water Dogs.
Yeah, you said Water Dogs.
Game. Yeah, I said it's going to be a 1-goal game, but I'm leaning Water Dogs.
That's the sheet right there in Columbus, Ohio. Book them.
Columbus is going to be a cool location. I forget if they went there last year, but I'm 95% positive they're playing in that new. I don't know if they're playing in the new Ohio State facility or they're playing in an MLS stadium there, but regardless, as you can see from Ohio State's, this past season they weren't that successful, but they're gaining popularity, they're gaining success. You can see the sport growing in that Midwest region. So I think it's going to be a great location for the PLL. I think they're going to get great crowds. I think that the TV ratings will go in line. I'll be tuning in. I'm sure a lot of our listeners will be tuning in. So, it's just great having access to lacrosse. And I think we talked about this in the past. Having it on ESPN, having it on ABC, even on ESPN Plus, pay the $14.99 it is. You get some great shit on ESPN Plus. You can watch the NHL games in the winter. You can watch any baseball game you want. And guess what? You can watch the PLL. It's a great deal, and I don't know why, if you're listening, if you don't have ESPN Plus, you don't have it, go get it.
And if you work at ESPN, give us a freaking brand deal after that fucking promo right there. Well done.
100%.
But yeah, man, I agree. And like, look, you talked about it. Like the sport's growing. Like to see it out in Columbus is cool. Like Ohio State being a good program is cool. And I think that's why we started the podcast, right? So like getting into like the second half of the show, not to spend too much time on it, but like I just want to like we're episode 33 now, right? So how are we feeling after 33 episodes of Rise Up? Like what we've accomplished a lot, man. So like we started like midway through the PLL season last year, and here we are. So it's almost a full year now. But like, how are you feeling? Like, what's your vibes of the pod? Like, what? Give me a little take here.
it's funny you bring it up, and it's great having you on for this conversation because I remember it like it was yesterday. It was Memorial Day weekend. Me and you were in Nantucket,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you came up to me and you told me that over at TorchPro we're starting a lacrosse podcast. And me being the lax rat that I am, I said you need to find a way for me to get involved in this. And
Yeah.
I hounded you and followed up, texted you like a couple weeks later, and you're like, all right, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. We figured it out. We're 33 episodes in. I'm so pumped with where we're at. I think we had a great transition from the college season to the PL season. I think that I've been getting more texts than ever in the past, 2 weeks. People agreeing or disagreeing with, shit I've said, people engaging with me on the back end saying, love this part of the episode. And I think just, for me personally, that increase of engagement from even my friends or, acquaintances just shows how much we're growing, which is awesome. I think that what we did last year at the end of the PLL season in Philly was huge for us. I think that was such a
Yeah.
cool experience, getting our boots on the ground and engaging with fans. You see how much cartoon characters, WWE characters, and legends Greg and Scotty are, and how many fans they have. And it was so cool to see just kids and parents and everyone in between coming up to them asking for pictures, asking for autographs. And it was a really cool experience. And, now that we're at the beginning of PLL season, I'm super excited to get to that culmination. And I'm expecting the crowds to be, tenfold from what we had last year.
I 100% agree. One of my next questions was going to be like, what's your because you had never met Greg Renley or Scotty Rogers prior to the podcast. It was kind of like we were about to start it, like you said. We had a few mudslides, and I was like, "Oh, Scotty Rogers and Greg Beast, we're doing this lacrosse podcast." And you're like, "Dude, let me in." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll think about it," because I didn't know how serious you were. Right? I was like, sure, he wants to do it. But then after a few weeks go by, and you kept hammering every other day, I was like, okay, he's pretty serious. And so got you introduced to the guys. But like, what's been like your biggest surprise with them? And like, I'll give you mine for each of them. Is like. One with Greg, he's a very well-spoken dude. He knows his shit. Like he's put together. Like he's dialed in on all fronts, and that's not just on the podcast. Like that's all aspects of life. Like it's cool to see what he's done with FOA, in the sport of lacrosse, his family, and now just with the podcast. So I was surprised, and this don't take it as a bad thing, Greg. But I was surprised to see how just dialed in he is with everything. And with Scotty, just I think he's one of the most misunderstood people on
That's what I was
social
going to say.
media. Honestly, he's such a teddy bear, and it's funny because the way I interacted with Scotty, and that's kind of how this all came together in the first place was. I interacted with Scotty on social media through our Morning Blitz account. If you don't know Morning Blitz, it's the newsletter that I started under TorchPro.
Subscribe.
Subscribe to the newsletter. But I was commenting on his shit. I chirped him just like everyone else does, but it was a funny jab, and he came back and followed us, and we went back and forth for a little bit. That's how we got started interacting. He came on my podcast. We chopped it up, and then 6 months go by. I was like, dude, you should have your own podcast. After I was watching him on social media, I was like, you're literally a superstar on social. And so I'm just surprised, because he's so misunderstood. He's a great dude. He's a big teddy bear, and I love having Scotty on the show. So those are my two big surprises with Greg and Scotty.
So it's funny because I remember when we got to the point where you realized I was serious about getting involved. You said, we'll get you on a conference call with Greg and Scotty, and
Yeah.
if they like you, if they like what you're about, then you're good to go. I think they were the last barrier for my entry. And,
Yes.
I had never met them before. I obviously knew who they were. Highly doubt they knew who I was. And got on the phone with them, just talked about, my vision, how much my love for the sport of lacrosse, my vision of how I want to see lacrosse grow, how I have opinions on lacrosse. I think it aligned with their vision as well, which was the first check that box. And as we, continue to talk, I think they realized I knew what I was talking about. I had a good mind for the game, and they liked my company, and then it was off to the races from there. But from not knowing them going into this and just seeing their presence on social media. I think my first game, I'll say game in quotation marks in the ML because I was on the sidelines in a polo shirt, was against the Lizards. And I remember seeing Greg out there taking faceoffs, and I was like, on that Lizards team, they had Greg, they had Paul, they had they had Will Manny, they had Pinnell, they had everyone. Joe Walters was on that team. That team was stacked, and I was like, this little shit on the sidelines in a polo shirt, being like these are guys that I watched growing up, and it was a super cool experience. But then like getting to talk to them, I realized, like you said about Greg, Greg is so business savvy. He's been such a huge linchpin for this podcast growing, our social media objectives, in our strategy. He's so savvy when it comes to that. And then you mentioned about Scotty. I think Scotty sometimes gets a bad rep on social media, but he's just the man. He loves, even though he says he doesn't sometimes love lacrosse, he fucking loves lacrosse. And he has such a storied career. He is so good at what he does. I love seeing him coach these younger goalies and pass on what he knows. I think that he got better in every stage of his career, which is hard to say for a lot of people. And I think Greg, same way, he got better from college to the pros and kept getting better. And I think that's what separates a good pro from a pro that, might have another job that isn't full-time lacrosse. And these two guys that I'm so lucky to do the podcast with were full-time lacrosse for so long. And it shows how dedicated they were on continuing to get better, and just how much they love the game. And now they get to give back to the game with this podcast. And I think that's so important. Everyone listening might not always agree with our opinions, right? That's what opinions are. Everyone has them. Some of them smell, whatever. That's what it is.
Engagement's great. That's what it's all about. Good
Exactly.
or bad.
But I respect their opinions so much, even if I don't agree with them, just because the things that they have done for the sport of lacrosse, it's awesome, and I'm just so happy to be able to talk to them once a week about their opinions on the sport.
Yeah, and like one more thing. I was fucking shocked of like the first time I met Scotty was at the PLL championship in Philly after a year of knowing him. I was shocked how fucking big he was, dude. And like I was like the big rig, like yeah, we know it. He fucking flexes on social and he looks big, but like dude, he's fucking a monster. So
They
that
don't
was
call
my
him the
last.
big rig for no reason.
Yeah, but like as like a producer of this show and like TorchPro, and like for anyone like listening that's like confused on what TorchPro is, like we're just a sports media network that's like powering the show, right? So we have different shows and franchises under our network. Rise Up's one of them. We have 4 other podcasts. We have a women's hockey podcast hosted by 2 Olympians. We have a mental health podcast hosted by an NHL player, Riley Shane and Tyler Smith. I do a podcast just talking to athletes about their journeys in sports. We do video series, docu-series, vlogs. We have a Morning Blitz newsletter. So, like, that's what our business is. And, like, we are freaking amped of, like, the success that Rise Up's had. Like, we see Rise Up, honestly, at TorchPro. It's like I'm watching the Vegas Knights lift the Stanley Cup right now as we speak. Like, Spit and Chicklets is a massive show, right? So, like, massive show in hockey, and, like, there are 2 great personalities on that show with some other talent as well. Like, Rise Up's like the Spit and Chicklets of lacrosse, and I think it's going to help grow the game. It's been cool to see, like, the show kind of take form over the last 12 months into what the product is today and be this, like, consistent weekly thing that, like, lacrosse fans can come and they know what to expect. Great takes, great knowledge and insight on the game from people who have been there, with a little bit of flavor and unfiltered fun. So I think the product's perfect. We're pumped at TorchPro with like the early success, and the sky's the limit for you boys, and excited to continue to watch and be kind of the behind the scenes producer of this thing.
Absolutely. I feel so fortunate that you tapped me in. I'm able to get involved with this. If you follow me on Twitter, I give my takes every once in a while where I see fit, and I'm a little bit held back, but here, you give me an outlet. I'm able to talk to just 2 veterans of professional lacrosse that know the game so well, and really, have an outlet to talk the game that I love. And whether it's, we talked about long episodes ago about, advice for youth lacrosse players or high school lacrosse players, or, then we talk about the NCAA season and, teams we like, and then now pros. And we get these guys, these pros on, we get these college players on, and we hear their side of the story, right? We don't know everything that's going on in their lives. And we now have the opportunity to kind of peel back that curtain, see what's going on, and just have different perspectives, challenge our opinions, like I said earlier. And it's awesome experience for me. It's something that I'm so fortunate of being on. And I'm so pumped that, you Heels have given me the opportunity to meet guys like Greg and Scotty. And I miss them today, but, you're a good replacement. And it's been a blast.
Yeah, no, sky's the limit. One last thing, funny story. So TorchPro, we have 6 full-time employees, right? We're a startup, but we're gritty. We get shit done. But the other 4 of the other guys are hockey guys. So our co-founder is Joe Pavelski, NHL superstar, stud for 17 years, all-star, all that. He has all the accolades. And his co-founder, his other co-founder is his best friend, Matt Fornataro, our CRO, CEO. They're all hockey guys. They don't know anything about lacrosse. I'm the guy who played college lacrosse and in the lacrosse guy. And so when they first started the show, they had no idea what was going on, right? They didn't know anything about the sport. But now they listen to the show on a weekly basis and love it and have become lacrosse fans, and they're even getting their kids into the sport. So it's cool to see for me. But we have a Slack channel, right, for Rise Up specifically internally. And I'm like, yeah, this week's guest is last year's MVP. It was Blaze Reardon. They're like, oh, that's you got the league MVP. That's awesome. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, this week actually the next one, it's the best player in the world, Tom Shriver. He's coming on. Oh, this week it's the MVP of the PLL championship, Michael Sowers. And that every single week I was just saying the new best player at their position or this great stat. They're dude, are you bullshitting us? Because every single week the guest is the greatest thing in the world, and it's cool because that has been. It's just that's the status. To consistently get those guests. We didn't really talk much about the interviews that you guys have had, which have been awesome. Some of my favorite content to listen to. But the interviews are just top tier in the sport, getting the best guys. Even the Team USA head coach last week, that doesn't happen across even Spit and Chicklets. Comparing it to that, they're not getting the top guys in the sport on a consistent basis to come on that show.
And that's another huge bump to Scotty and Greg and their network and their access. But you're absolutely right. If you're a lacrosse fan and you're tuning in, we are so fortunate that we do have access to these top tier players. And I think that's what's special about lacrosse. And you see it at PLL games when you go to them, how accessible players are. It's not where, you're at an NFL game where they're barricaded off and there's security guards around them. Professional lacrosse players, where we are at right now in the world of professional lacrosse, they're very accessible. And that's a great thing for young fans because they're able to interact with them. It's great for us as a podcast that we're able to get them on. And, we probably don't have to deal with as much bullshit and, jumping through agents and media people and PR. So it's nice that we do have that access. And if you are a fan of the sport, this is, like we said, your one-stop shop for all of that good stuff. We do get the best guests. If there's someone that you want us to get on who we haven't got on, please tweet at us, and I promise you we can get them on.
Yeah, I love it, man. So yeah, that's a wrap. If you're listening to the show right now and you're not subscribed to the podcast, subscribe to the damn podcast. As Saib said, as we've talked about a little bit on this episode, I work at TorchPro. I'm the producer. Go check out the rest of our content. Head to our YouTube channel. Head to our Instagram. Check out our Morning Blitz newsletter. Check out some of our other content. Think you guys will like it. But I'm pumped to see Rise Up continue to do big things. And it's only up from here. And it's going to be a great PLL season. Lots of great content coming. So Saibs, keep at it. And maybe I'll join some more shows with Greg and Scotty, and I'll push their buttons a little bit.
Hell yeah. Let's go. Great having you.
All right. Let's go. All right. See you
next
boys.
week.
Until next week.